everyone, welcome to the forecast for the upcoming Scorpio New Moon, which happens on the 15th of November 2020. So in many ways this moon is kind of a follow-on from the new moon that we had back in, I think it was end of April, beginning of May. And that was, I think, a full moon in Scorpio. So those two sort of lunar phases almost kind of bookend each other in much the same way as the recent blue moon that we had in Taurus bookended the new moon in Taurus that we had back in April. That we're dealing with a new moon here, so it's a kind of a new cycle starting on many levels, and I think this fits with the fact that we've just had the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, which is the final pass of the three that happened in, I think, beginning of April, around about the 444 gateway, and then about the 29th of June, and then finally on the 12th of November, just after the 1111 portal. So very important karmic cycles closing out, and a lot of collective energy around at the moment, and I think this is going to be reflected too in this particular full moon. The Sabian symbol also points to leadership and to it kind of firmly puts the focus on the collective and on collective efforts, humanitarian efforts, how we can be of service to the group, and also leadership. So I think it's interesting that Joe Biden's chart, for example, he's got the Sun and Mercury at around about 21 and 21 Scorpio, which is very close to where this full moon will be. I mean, sorry, this new moon, which is around about 23 degrees of Scorpio. So, and the Sabian symbol too points to crowds coming down a mountain to listen to a specific leader. So, I find it interesting that this particular new moon falls very close to his personal planets, including Mercury, which is of course the planet of communication. So it's possible that in the next 2 weeks he could be making some important speeches, and I think Americans will be listening very carefully, and the world of course, to see what he has to say, because he'll be announcing, I'm sure, some policy kind of points and maybe departures from the Trump regime that I think will sort of set the tone for his presidency. Now, it's also possible, given that we haven't had official figures yet from the election, that we could also get some of those now in the 2 weeks of the waning moon cycle that follow on from this particular, waxing moon cycle that follow on for this new moon. That's certainly possible. I think Nevada, for example, said that they wouldn't announce results until about the 14th of November because they were waiting for all the postal votes to come in from the armed services and so on. And that's, of course, just before this particular new moon. So I think what this new moon is going to do on a collective level is it's going to almost confirm Biden's presidency, make it official, if you like. And I think we can see that as a metaphor for the kind of energy that we're working with. It's almost like it's time for new leaders to step onto the stage. It's very much a collective energy rather than a personal energy. Although I will say, though, that if you've got anything close to 23 degrees of Scorpio in your chart, then of course this is going to have personal kind of overtures. And of course we'll get into that when we look at the geoscope that follows on from this particular reading. But let's have a look at the chart briefly. There are a couple of things I want to point out. So let's get into that quickly next. So as you can see from this astrology, we've got the Sun and the Moon at 23 degrees and 17 minutes of Scorpio. You can see Mercury has newly ingressed back into Scorpio at about 5 degrees, and then both the Sun and the Moon are making a conjunction to a fixed star called Agena. Now, Agena is quite interesting, Alhena. No, it's Agena. Agena is quite interesting for a number of reasons, which I will get into sort of more in depth in my written forecast. But just as a kind of summary, this is the energy, or this is the fixed star that is in one of the feet of the Centaur, the Centaurus, the Centaur, the constellation, the Centaur, and this is a large constellation that's in the southern hemisphere and is said to be holding Lupus the wolf in his outstretched hand. And he's thought by both the Greeks and the Arabs to be making his way to the altar to make a sacrifice, which is really interesting given some of the I Ching messages that came through at the 1111 portal. There's a lot there about making sacrifices to the earth altar. So that's interesting. So to that end, he's often shown carrying a water canteen for the necessary offering. And he's also associated with being a healer and a teacher, but he also carries a wound. So in that sense, he's quite similar to Chiron. And of course, this particular image, I think, fits quite well with Joe Biden, actually. You know, he is in many ways very similar to Chiron, the wounded healer, you know, in that he has suffered a lot of setbacks in his life, you know, the death of his wife, from a car accident along with his child, and then later on in his life his son died from cancer. So he's had a lot of loss in his life, and I think, as I was saying in my forecast for the election, that in that sense he's the perfect person to be becoming president of America at the moment, because he can really embody that idea of the consoler in chief, which I think came out strongly in the Geoscope, actually, with all that energy around Tristia, which was about sorrow and mourning. So America, in many senses, kind of reeling still from the impact of COVID-19, a very, very high death toll there, and I feel like he is the person you know, who can be compassionate and who's been there, so he can really empathize with the people right now. So another interesting, you know, sort of overlap there. So overall, this particular fixed star is associated with a natural ability to deal with everyday matters, and a path that it's the gift of the common touch. So again, what I was talking about with Joe Biden, I think he really is somebody to embody the idea of someone who doesn't have ideas above their station, not almost the opposite to Trump, with all his gold and, you know, sitting up in his tower, quite removed from the people, you know, quite elitist. So very, very interesting that this kind of energy is around right now. So that's the first thing to say. The second is that the new moon will be making a really nice trine to Neptune. So this will have a kind of a dreamy feel to it, which I think will probably be quite welcome after all the intense energy of Scorpio season. This will help to kind of soften that sun and moon in Scorpio somewhat. And I think it will help us to kind of connect with our kind of spiritual ideals and with creative inspiration. And I also see this as being about spiritual downloads, so getting information through from the spiritual dimensions and from masters and teachers in the spiritual realms. And then it's also making a sextile to that stellium, that power stellium of Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto, still in Capricorn. So they're very, very close to each other. Of course, we've just had the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction on the 12th of November, as I said. And Saturn's not too far away at about 27 degrees of Capricorn. So also very grounding energy. This is an earth-water sextile. And so I really feel that whatever comes up now in terms of emotions, you know, because Scorpio is very visceral, so whatever kind of comes up from the subconscious for processing, or you know, that needs kind of you know, looking at, I really feel as though this can be handled in a very contained, grounded and pragmatic way, almost sort of step by step, that we have the kind of mastery, the skills to really deal with some fairly difficult, sometimes dark energy, that I also feel is coming up for the collective to you know, to kind of work through. We really are kind of clearing. You know, if you talk to any of the channels right now, I'm thinking here of like Mariah Beretta, for example, of One Precious Light. She talked a lot about the need for you know, the ancestral karma kind of coming up and needing to be processed, and that of course is embodied in that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, which can very much be about stuff that we've inherited through our family lines, particularly paternal lines, because both Jupiter, Pluto and Saturn are all quite masculine energies, and of course so I do feel like there's some clearing and stuff that can happen there. Healing too, you know, Scorpio is really associated quite strongly with healing. This is through things like kinesthesiology, anything to do with the telluric energies of the earth, and with kind of how can I put this, sort of waves of magnetism. You know, Scorpio is very much associated with magnetism, so magnetism in all forms, hypnotism too, of course. So so that could be highlighted. Much depends, of course, on where Pluto, Jupiter and Saturn sit in your chart and what they rule, of course. So that will you know, be very individual in terms of its expression. But on the whole, though, I do think that this will feel to most people globally as almost like we're kind of entering a new time. You know, people have also talked about how you know, I certainly know that I wasn't the only person who felt back in June when we had that lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, that there was a danger of potentially America certainly descending into civil war, particularly with that Pluto return. And what many channels have said, you know, is that we've passed those tipping points, those potential tipping points where things could, you know, would have reached a critical mass and could have gone sort of kind of downhill, but instead you know, due to the sort of focused energy of light workers and people really focused on clearing kind of blocks within the collective consciousness, we've shifted onto a much better timeline. So I think that new moon is going to feel very like we have kind of crossed a threshold in many ways, and I think it would have started at the 11:11 portal with that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. So that's something else to bear in mind. I also think that this is a fantastic new moon for manifesting. So any seeds that you plant at this time, I think, will be grounded by that stellium in Capricorn, which is of course earth energy, and you know, Saturn in particular is a fantastic manifesting energy, and then you add the sort of amplifying quality of Jupiter, and on top of that the really powerful energy, the transformative energy of Pluto. And I think it's possible to really kind of move mountains now if we all kind of combine our energies and work together as a collective. But you know, equally on an individual level, I think there's a lot that we can do now to really move closer to our sense of purpose and to root our intentions from the spiritual realms into the 3D now. So it'll be interesting to see what comes through in the Geomancy. But I think those are the kind of the key things to look out for. Is you know, that's the trine to Neptune, and of course it's worth saying too that Neptune will be going direct at the end of November, so that's something else to look out for, because of course that will still be within the waxing moon kind of phase, the 2 weeks that follow this particular new moon. And it's good also that the moon has now synced back up with the solar cycle, so we've again you know, we're starting to get new and full moons at exactly the 1st and the 15th. It's just that they're still inverted in terms of the fact that the new moon happens mid-month rather than at the beginning of the month. But anyway, that aside, let's get into the forecast, the geoscope, and see what you know wants to come through in that. So welcome back, everyone. As you can see, I've cracked out my Geomancy cards. So let's start shuffling and see what messages want to come out for this new moon in Scorpio, particularly for the collective in relation to the 3D. Perfect. Alright, so let's start with the positions of the Sun and the Moon. Interesting. So here we've got, in the position of Scorpio, this is where the Sun and the Moon will be, we've got a Missio, and this is Venus in Taurus, so it's Earth energy, so quite grounded, as I was saying. So this is almost to me a confirmation of that sextile to the stellium in Capricorn, that this new moon will really help to kind of ground intentions, and particularly on the collective level, quite nicely. So I think manifesting will be a bit easier than usual. which is, you know, I'm sure always good to hear in these trying economic times. So a miss here is about letting go and releasing, and again I think this points to the need for karmic releasing that I was talking about when we looked at the astrology. There's certainly a need to kind of release what isn't serving, to accept, to kind of cut our losses, to accept what isn't working, and just to kind of move on from it. And you know, where there are setbacks and disappointments, you know, to see it as kind of you know, a case of you know, rejection is redirection kind of thing, or potentially protection, that you know, there's a reason why some things didn't work out, and even though we may not be able to see it you know, why right now, we will at some point. So that's the first thing to say. Let's have a look and see what's going on at the bottom of the chart. So here we've got Cauda Draconis, which is the tail of the dragon, the south node. And so at the root of this particular reading is, again, a need for release. So I think, again, pointing to sort of a release of karma, cleansing and purging, you know, in the sense of healing and of transmuting dark energy into something, you know, it's alchemy, essentially. So letting go of what's no longer serving, also seeing when certain situations, relationships, jobs, or ways of living are ending, and there's a need to sort of, you know, not to hang on, not to cling on, and to allow a cycle to come to a close so that we can all kind of move on to the next phase. So this is Taurus. Now this is where, interesting, we've got Caput Draconis. This is where Uranus is currently. And here we've got the opposite geomantic figure to Cauda Draconis. So this is the head of the dragon, the north node, and this is what I would expect to see at a new moon. So interesting that it's kind of opposite the Scorpio new moon here. So this is really talking about new beginnings. So you can see that whilst there's a need to release, particularly when it comes to the, like ancestral karma, this is the fourth house of home, family and roots. So while there's a need to kind of clear your roots, as it were, there is also a need, particularly when it comes to relationships and contracts and new agreements, for new things to come in. So new business partnerships, new working relationships, new romantic relationships possibly too. This is the house of marriage. So I think new partnerships forming on lots of different levels. There's potential for that at this new moon. And then at the top we've got, interesting, Tristia. What was I talking about when we, you know, when I was talking about Joe Biden? So Tristia is Saturn in Aquarius, and you know, I've said this at almost every reading, but Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn will ingress into Aquarius in December, and just like not very long after that is going to make that wonderful conjunction to Jupiter, which is, it only happens once every 20 years, so really quite a big deal, kind of pressing the reset button and really taking us into the age of Aquarius in a big way. You know, Saturn did ingress into Aquarius around about the time of the spring equinox back in April, but then it went retrograde and it moved back into Capricorn. So we've essentially been kind of cleaning up, resolving anything left over from Saturn's tour through Capricorn, which I think started around about 2017, 2018. So we've been kind of wrapping things up as far as that is concerned. And here I'm thinking collectively too, around things like tradition, convention, patriarchy, you know, all of that stuff. And of course, you know, even though we may be starting a new cycle, Tristia here talks about mourning and loss, and this came up, I think, at the equinox, the harvest new moon that we had, no, full moon in Aries. So there may be links to that, and there was definitely, this came up very, very strongly in the election forecast that I did, the Geoscope on YouTube. So I kind of feel as though, you know, part of letting go means also giving things their due respect. You know, even though you know something may need to go, it doesn't mean that you won't be sad to see it go. And I think it's proper to sort of give something the respect, the acknowledgement that it deserves, and without feeling the need to cling. I think that's the difference, is, you know, being able to kind of you know, give dues where dues are due, but then kind of move on. And you know, I think particularly with these two cards here, we are really talking about releasing what's no longer serving, and getting ready to move on with this Caput Draconis over here. So let's look now at some of the the aspects. So the first one is of course that sextile to Capricorn, which is in the 3rd house, because it's Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn. So this is where Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter are currently. Interesting. So reiterating exactly what I was saying, this idea of release. We've got a repetition of the South Node here. So I think it's pointing to that stellium as being about releasing ancestral karma and what isn't serving. Essentially doing a bit of a detox, kind of clearing the way so we can all press the reset button, particularly once we get to those the last set of eclipses for 2020 that start right at the end of November, with that around about the 30th, with a lunar eclipse, and that's followed shortly afterwards by a solar eclipse at the winter solstice, and that is essentially the reset button par excellence for 2020, moving into 2021. So some work to do, I think, but of course we will clarify with the Magpie Oracle shortly. So the other aspect that happens at this new moon is that wonderful trine to Neptune in Pisces. So Pisces is here in the 5th house. Let's see what we've got. Oh, how wonderful. Jupiter in Pisces. So this is Laetitia, which is of course water energy. This is all about joy, happiness, expansive emotions, hope, the return of hope. And I really feel so strongly that we are moving towards that now. It might not feel like it because collectively we feel as though we have been moving through a bit of a dark night, but we are going to come out the other side in December, and things will get lighter and lighter, I think, as we move towards that solar eclipse and the winter solstice and that wonderful Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. So lovely to see this in the reading. I think it's just saying, keep that candle burning, don't lose hope. We really are moving past that tipping point and into much more hopeful energy, so kind of hang in there. So that's beautiful stuff. All right, let's have a look at economics, at money. Right, so when it comes to money at this new moon, we've got Populus, which is a lunar geomantic figure. We've got the moon in Cancer here. This is water energy, which vibes quite nicely with Scorpio. So Populus is usually about collective efforts. So this is things like crowdfunding. It's the stock market, which kind of runs on sort of groupthink. It's also any form of collective, where say a lot of people put money together to sort of to buy something or to do something. That's where the focus is currently. So kind of think about the kind of the quantitative model rather than the qualitative. So selling large volumes of something cheap rather than aiming for 1 or 2 sales of something expensive. That seems to be the way to go at this particular lunar cycle. Let's have a look at the 8th house. Interesting. Okay, so a reiteration of Tristia, which is, as I say, it's sorrow and loss to an extent. It's also the fallen tower, which has been a huge symbol, particularly around Trump, and the fall of the kind of Trump empire, if you like. So this is the space of the 8th house is sex, death, taxes, intimacy, and this is of course shared resources, usually with one other. It can be a person, or it could be a spirit, kind of spiritual teachers, or a spirit master, somebody in the realm of spirit. So I think just saying that it's a good idea to kind of combine forces, or ask for help if you need help in sort of releasing this energy. So get, if for example you really feel blocked in a sense and you can't do your own clearing, maybe see if you can find a spiritual teacher or a healer that can help you with that kind of thing, so you don't get stuck. don't kind of fall into a pit of depression, which is always potential when you kind of going through the dark night of the soul. You can sometimes get a little bit stuck there, so it's important to to get help and support when you need it. So I think that's what that is pointing to. Let's have a look at groups. Interesting. So again, another very lunar symbol of this is Via. So again, water energy. So Via for me is it's almost the sort of opposite to populace. So this is all about crowds, and you can see it's all double dots, and this is about an individual setting out on a journey. So literally the road, and you can see it's all single dots. So I think what it's kind of saying is that collectively we are going to make progress now. We're going to take a step forward as a collective. Humanity is going to head in the right direction. Momentum is building now at this new moon, taking us forward towards that, into the gateway of the eclipses, and then into the path of that winter solstice. So I think it's saying, together, if we combine our efforts and our intentions and willpower, we can actually all help to generate the energetic momentum needed to move everyone forward, which is fantastic. Let's have a look at what's going on in the 12th house. Wow, yes, lovely. So this is the sun in Leo. This is fire energy. So yes, this is what I feel that we're kind of birthing collectively, is we're moving into a really fortunate time. I do really feel strongly that Jupiter, Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Aquarius is going to augur in a much more fortunate time moving forward, and an era that is going to lead to prosperity, but not prosperity at the sort of cost of certain individuals. It's going to be more of everybody benefits kind of thing, a much more democratic form of kind of wealth creation, more kind of merit based, and more where abundance is more equally distributed. And so I think there is this gradual feeling of optimism building within the collective, that I think will continue to build and become more obvious as we move towards December, and particularly once we move into Sagittarius season, which starts around about the 22nd or the 23rd of November. So that's something to look forward to. And then when it comes to health, okay, so yes, I mean, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, COVID levels are kind of up again, and Saturn in Capricorn here casts there is really about feeling imprisoned, so lockdown here. Certainly there is lockdown here in the UK, which will last until beginning of December, so that's about right. And that also means that companies are also a little bit hamstrung again, because workers aren't able to come into work, and it does make logistics a little bit tricky. So yes, I think a kind of a temporary freeze there when it comes to movement and momentum, but there's no stopping innovation as a way kind of around that. Oh, wonderful. So in the 9th house we've got a repetition here of Laitisha. So again, this beautiful, hopeful energy, and I think this is almost a reiteration, a sign from Spirit that that we're right to be cultivating joy and a sense of optimism, because things are definitely on the up now. It might not feel like it, but I think it will become more clear that this is that things have changed, that the wheel has turned as we move towards December. So that's really great. Now let's get some trinkets just to clarify. Yes, beautiful. So for the new moon itself, we've got the sun here. So I think just really highlighting this Fortuna Major energy, which is all about success, optimism, a bright new future, illumination, the clouds clearing basically, the rain clearing away and the sun coming out. So that's beautiful. Okay, let's have a look at the Capricorn stellium. So what are we releasing? Wonderful. So this is literally, it's meant to represent a mountain. I know it looks like a pyramid. So this is about clearing blocks, essentially, blocks to progress. And of course, while those 3 planets were retrograde over the summer, and we had, you know, Venus retrograde on top of that with those squares to Neptune, it did feel kind of really quite frustrating. The energies has been very, very frustrating. It got kind of amplified once Mars went retrograde, and Mercury went retrograde in October, November. So Mars will actually station on the 14th, so just before this new moon. So I think that we'll start to feel blocks lifting and momentum kind of building again. Now with that, I do think that there may be a little bit of suppressed or kind of buried anger that might kind of come to the surface. You know, we might feel the need to vent a little bit, and I think it's just a good idea to be as mindful as possible. You know, not to sort of take it out on other people, but try and find constructive ways to do that. You know, either exercise or, you know, some kind of energy release work, just to you know, to get rid of that pent-up energy, essentially. Now let's have a look at Neptune. So what do we have to be joyful about? Right, wonderful. So the garden. Now for me, this is pointing to what I was saying at the full moon in Taurus, that if we look back to the energies that we're dealing with now, a lot of it points back to seeds that were planted back in April. You know, we had that 444 gateway where there was a lot of meditation. We had those group meditations where we were sort of planting seeds for peace, for humanity kind of moving on to a much more hopeful and abundant timeline, avoiding war, and so on and so on. And so I really feel like this is almost like the flowers, that the seeds that we planted then are now starting to kind of bloom. Or at the very least, you know, the little shoots are starting to kind of come up. So I think it's kind of saying, you know, joy is starting to sort of bubble up from below the surface. Baby steps, but, you know, kind of keep it up. You know, just keep that joy alive. And this is very much the house of creativity and of children. So I think it's really about those little sprouts that are kind of starting to form within the collective, of hope again, that we need to sort of really cultivate and nurture so that they continue to grow. So those are the sort of the main kind of energies. But let's have a look at that Tristia at the top. Beautiful. Yes, so this is the stork, and of course the stork is all about positive changes, the birth of a new time. So I think really pointing to what I was saying about that ingress of Saturn back into Aquarius and the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that's happening in December. So I think it's saying, yes, fear not, dry your eyes, you know, kind of mourn what needs to be mourned, but know that we are moving towards a more hopeful time, that the tower needs to fall. Old power structures and institutions need to go, so that we can make way for something that's much, much better, kind of moving forward. So I think very, very positive. Now let's see what the outcome of this reading is. Wow. Stunning. Absolutely stunning. So I think just really reiterating that this is the beginning of a new cycle. It's almost like we are turning the page, a blank sheet of paper here with Albus as the outcome. Albus literally means white. Here we've got Caput Draconis, which is all about fresh karmic cycles, new cycles starting, perfect for a new moon. And then we've got Fortuna Major, so reiterating this beautiful sunny energy that we've got here in the 12th house and in the trinket that we've got for the new moon itself. So I think it's definitely saying, have hope, you know, keep the faith alive, keep the candle burning in the darkness, keep moving forward. A new cycle is coming, a new age is coming, you know, that age of Aquarius with the Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn conjunction. So, you know, fear not, keep moving forward, keep looking forward, you know, with anticipation that things are getting better. What I also find interesting is that Albus is ruled by Jupiter in Gemini, Mercury in Gemini, and Gemini and Sagittarius are the axis that is going to be very active at this next set of eclipses. So I think also pointing to that as a sort of a reset, particularly that solar eclipse that we have in December, as being a kind of major reset moving into 2021. I think it's the last eclipse for 2020, and I think we're going to go out on a high note, essentially, which is fantastic. I'm sure everyone is thrilled to hear that. 2020 has not been a picnic, that's for sure. Alright, let's get some trinkets just to clarify. Fascinating what I was saying about the tower. With the Tristia, we've got the tower here. Look at that. So we've got the book with the blank sheet of paper. You can't make this up, can you? So so I think it's really kind of saying that we're moving into a new era, particularly as far as leadership is concerned. So I do think that, announcements and speeches by leaders like Joe Biden will kind of pave the way for for a new era on the in terms of the social collective, the sort of politics and power structures and that kind of thing. I also think that messages potentially will be coming in, signs about where you're kind of starting new cycles, new kind of karmic cycles in particular. So it could also point to new people coming in into your life. The tower, you can read it in a lot of different ways, but in conjunction with Fortuna Major, which is, as I said, it's very optimistic, expansive, confident energy. So I think here it's kind of talking about the need to be confident in yourself, to shine your light, to feel like you're a beacon in the dark, essentially, with a light at the top, like a lighthouse almost. So not being afraid to shine your light, to speaking your truth, to sort of radiating from your kind of inner core outwards as you come more into alignment with your purpose, and also with your how you're here to serve the collective on a kind of humanitarian level. And then we've got the book with Albus, which for me really talks about turning over a new leaf, a new chapter. The book can sometimes be about learning and knowledge, and as I said, we are activating once again the Gemini Sagittarius axis, which is all about knowledge on one hand, wisdom on the other. So I think it's about kind of getting very, very clear about data and information on one hand versus the way that we interpret information and knowledge on the other hand. With particularly all this stuff about fake news, propaganda. So kind of learning to use your own judgment to just discern what resonates with you, what really feels true, and of course using logic as a way to sort of back that up, and just generally walking into a new era where we combine sort of data with wisdom, because very often knowledge can be a dangerous thing unless it's used wisely, and not all information is always positive. If you think of the idea of the truth can hurt. So lots of interesting themes going on here with Albus, but I think overall definitely pointing to a release of sorrow and ancient karmic cycles here, a release of blocks too, seeing seeds starting to sprout or bloom that we sowed back in April. Positive changes happening here, so moving from this kind of sorrow dark night energy into something a lot more optimistic, confident, joyful and happy. So I think overall a really, really, really positive reading. So hope you have got something out of this. Again, always appreciate your likes, shares and subscribes. And as usual, I will be doing a written forecast where I go more in depth into the astrology of all of this. So if you're interested in that, then do go to my website. Link is below in the description box, and subscribe, and I'll put you on my mailing list. But I'm wishing you all the very best for the upcoming 2 weeks of this waxy moon cycle, and I'll catch you again for my eclipse forecasts at the end of November.